Hi, welcome back. So in this week's lecture, we're going to focus on the effects of aging on attention and memory. So I first want to start off by saying that attention and memory are very closely linked. In order for us to remember information, we have to pay attention to it, and information has to be processed. So as researchers, we look at how people process and make sense of information from their surroundings. And we find that attention and thought are interconnected. Our attention affects our higher level thinking, and our thinking influences what we focus on. To build knowledge and remember things, we need to notice and pay attention, and what we already know shapes what we notice. Current research shows that memory and attention don't simply decline with age, as we often previously thought, but how we process information and how much we process can change with age, depending on the task and context. For example, older adults may struggle more with remembering long lists of unrelated words, but they often perform just as well or even better with emotionally significant or personally relevant information. So one question is, how does information get processed into the brain? There is an information processing model that uses a computer analogy to describe how people handle information. Just like a computer, our brains receive the information, transform it, encode it, and store it in different ways. Initially, information is kept temporarily, similar to a computer's buffer, before it gets stored more permanently, like on a hard drive or in the cloud. Later, we can retrieve this information when needed. To understand this process, the information processing model is based on three key ideas. One is that people actively engage with information. So people are active participants in the process. Number two is that both quantitative and qualitative aspects of performance can be examined. So both how much and what type of information is remembered can be measured. And three, information processing occurs in a series of hypothetical stages or steps. All memories begin with sensory input, such as hearing a song, seeing a person, or feeling something. Sensory memory is a brief and almost identical representation of the stimuli that exists in the observable environment. And so sensory memory is the first step in processing information, and it briefly holds a nearly exact copy of the sensory input from our environment. It can quickly take in a lot of information without the same limits as other types of memory. And we only need to experience things in the environment for a brief moment to process the information. It's like the memory of a stimulus stays in your mind even after the stimulus is gone. We also need attention, which is the basics that we need in order to process sensory information. And one way to understand attention is from a functional perspective. Attention consists of different dimensions, each serving a specific purpose. When we perform complex tasks that involve processing information, we often use multiple attentional functions. We manage our attention by shifting focus between these functions. Additionally, our ability to maintain attention and speed at which we process new information affect our attentional processes. In our brain, controlling attention involves the coordination of activities in the parietal and frontal lobes. Processing speed refers to how quickly and efficiently the initial steps of processing information are completed. Research, including brain imaging studies, shows that how processing speed changes with age can vary depending on the task. because not all parts of mental processing slow down at the same rate. Additionally, the level of beta amyloid proteins in the brain, which are linked to development of dementia, is related to how much processing speed declines. Processing resources is the amount of attention that a person has to apply to a particular situation. And so, in other words, it's the total amount of attention a person can dedicate to a specific situation. Changes in brain structure and the connections between neurons contribute to age-related differences in abilities. And this was thought previously to be due to a decline in cognitive resources. Two specific ways to measure this are through inhibitory loss and attentional resources. So inhibitory loss is the idea that older adults have difficulty inhibiting noise or the processing of information in the environment that's irrelevant to the task. So research studies show that people ages 85 and older often have more distracting thoughts while they are processing information or they're completing a task. They describe this as difficulty focusing or experiencing their mind wander. And this could explain why older adults tend to have challenges when it comes to shifting and dividing their attention. There was a study done by Kimber and colleagues, and they found that supportive messages can help reduce distracting thoughts and improve everyday tasks for middle-aged and older adults. Based on this research, some simple strategies have been created to help older adults manage irrelevant information. So for instance, asking them to close their eyes or look away from distractions can boost their performance. Another aspect for decline in processing with age is attentional change. And so it involves how well adults can juggle multiple tasks at once. And this multitasking requires dividing attention among different tasks. And so it used to be believed that older adults struggle more than younger adults with divided attention. However, a lot of research now shows that older adults are just as able to multitask, but they do perform each task a bit more slowly. And so while it was commonly believed that older adults struggle more with divided attention, the differences that we're seeing are often due to older adults having more difficulty with individual tasks rather than their act of spreading their attention. And so in workplace observations, older adults can handle simpler multitasking, but they do complete tasks more slowly, and they generally face challenges with more complicated tasks, which impacts their performance. There was another study done by Lee and colleagues, and they found that older adults prioritize walking and maintaining balance over memory tasks. And so they found that they focused on what matters most to them, which was safely walking and preventing falls. Neurological studies support this finding as well. In contrast to that, younger adults prioritize memory performance and they may overlook walking and balancing. So, in essence, older adults focus on the task that's most important to them. And so when older adults forget what they went downstairs to get, it's often because they were focused on walking safely rather than on their intended task. Two additional concepts that enhance our understanding of attention and cognitive processing are automatic processing and effortful processing. Automatic processing requires little attentional capacity and allows information to enter our system without us being consciously aware of it. Some automatic processes seem to be pre-wired, needing no attentional resources or practice, while others are learned through experience. These two types of processing are managed by different brain systems. For example, experienced drivers often stop at stop signs without thinking about it. Tasks that rely on automatic processing typically show no significant age differences. On the other hand, effortful processing demands all available attentional resources. Most deliberate memory tasks, such as memorizing a list of words, require effortful processing. We have to be fully aware of what we are doing in order to complete the task. So, for example, when you're learning to drive a manual car, you consciously have to manage how to control the clutch and accelerator. In this case, age differences do often arise in effortful processing. Researchers have noted a decline in older adults' performance on memory tasks in lab settings. However, the situation can change depending on the context of the task, including how relevant and accessible the information is and the individual's expertise. When a task only requires familiarity with the information, age differences may not be present. However, when remembering the information requires more effort, age differences become evident. Memory researchers have traditionally concentrated on three main steps in memory processing that might explain age differences. One is encoding, the second is storage, and the third is retrieval. Encoding is the process of entering information into the memory system. Storage refers to how that information gets represented and maintained in memory. And lastly, retrieval is the act of accessing information from memory. Since there is no evidence suggesting age differences in how information is organized in storage, most studies have focused on encoding and retrieval as potential sources of age-related differences. Working memory is the active process of holding information in your mind and using it at the same time, often along with new information to solve problems, make decisions, or learn. Researchers see working memory as a broad term that covers various short-term memory and processing activities related to different cognitive skills. It plays a crucial role in how we encode, store, and retrieve information. Unlike sensory memory, which can handle a lot of incoming information, working memory has a limited capacity. Because it deals with information we're processing right now, it acts as a mental scratch pad. If we don't do something to keep that information active, it quickly gets forgotten. This is where rehearsal comes in. We can keep information in working memory by repeating it or by linking it to things we already know. Research shows that working memory tends to decline with age, but the exact extent of this decline is still debated. The decline is significant because working memory is essential for understanding age-related differences in memory. If older adults struggle to hold information in working memory, it can affect their overall cognitive abilities. When information is not fully integrated or becomes unclear due to working memory issues, it does become hard to remember things. So as I stated earlier, working memory capacity tends to decline with age, and it seems to be related to declines in storage capacity, the ability to allocate capacity to more than one task, and slower rates of information processing. Not all age-related declines in working memory are the same. Performance can vary depending on the type of information and the tasks involved. For example, older adults tend to show a greater decline in spatial working memory compared to verbal working memory. Although there are declines in both, more knowledge can sometimes help older adults offset some of these declines. And so greater working knowledge counterbalances declines in working memory in some situations. Several factors may contribute to the decline in working memory, including alertness at different times of the day, the order of tasks, and interference from other tasks. And additionally, older adults may find it harder to manage multiple elements in working memory once they are accessed. Along with working memory, we can categorize memory into two other types: implicit memory and explicit memory. Implicit memory is also known as procedural memory, and it allows us to recall information without consciously thinking about it. So, for example, we often perform tasks such as brushing our teeth automatically without actively thinking about each step. A similar situation would be driving our car. We may manage to get home without actually thinking about it. Explicit memory or declarative memory involves intentionally and consciously remembering information we've learned at a specific time. So whether we see age-related differences in implicit memory depends on the specific task. So for instance, older adults may struggle with learning sequences of information, but they usually do well with spatial tasks. Research using brain imaging shows that older adults often exhibit increased activity in the frontal cortex, which is typical when they are trying to compensate for memory declines. Studies also show differences in how certain brain areas, such as the prefrontal cortex and medial temporal lobe, communicate in older adults. Most research on aging and memory tends to focus on explicit memory, and generally performance on explicit memory declines with age. Long-term memory is our ability to remember a lot of information for various lengths of time, from seconds to years. We use long-term memory in our everyday life, such as remembering routines, studying for a test, summarizing a book or a movie, and keeping track of our appointments. Research shows that long-term memory isn't just one thing. It includes different systems that rely on different parts of the brain. Two key types of long-term memory are semantic memory and episodic memory. Semantic memory is about learning and understanding the meanings of words and concepts, independent of specific events. For example, it helps you know word definitions for crossword puzzles, translate languages, or follow along in a lecture. Episodic memory is the conscious recollection of information from a specific event or point in time. So for example, episodic memory would help you recall what you studied for an exam, remember your summer vacation last year, or memorizing a speech for a play. Episodic and semantic memory are affected differently by aging. Episodic memory remains stable typically until ages 55 to 60, and then it declines sharply starting at age 65. In contrast, semantic memory tends to increase from ages 35 to 55 before leveling off. While semantic memory begins to decline around age 65, this decline is much less significant than that of episodic memory. Semantic memory is generally well preserved during normal aging. Research indicates that there are no major deficits in processes related to semantic memory, such as understanding language, organizing knowledge, or accessing general information. Because retrieving semantic memories usually doesn't strain working memory, older adults can rely on their experience with word meanings and general knowledge. Unlike episodic memories, which require cues from specific experiences, Semantic memories are retrieved as part of our broader knowledge. Age-related changes can, however, occur in semantic memory if it becomes difficult to access information. One reason for this is that if the knowledge isn't used regularly, it can be harder to retrieve. So, for example, you might have learned a language in childhood but struggle to recall it if you haven't used it in a while. You may feel that you should know a word, but you just can't remember it. Another reason age differences can show up in semantic memory tasks is due to the brief retrieval failures. A common example is the tip of the tongue or feeling of knowing experience. This happens when you're sure that you know a name or word but can't process it or access it at that moment. So, for instance, at a party, you might recognize someone but struggle to remember their name, even though you can recall details like how many syllables it has or the first letters. Older adults tend to experience these moments more often and report less partial information compared to younger individuals, both in experiments and everyday situations. This suggests that even familiar information can become harder to retrieve as we age. Researchers typically investigate episodic memory by asking individuals to learn information such as a list of words, and then they test their ability to recall or recognize those items. In a recall test, participants must remember specific information without any hints. Everyday examples of recall include recounting details about a movie, remembering a grocery list, or taking an essay exam without notes. In contrast, recognition involves identifying previously learned information from a set of options. Several factors can influence people's performance on episodic memory tests and any observed age differences. These include how the information is presented, the speed of presentation, the familiarity of the material, and the type of test administered. Research from numerous studies indicates that older adults generally perform worse than younger adults on recall tests, often omitting more information, introducing more intrusions, and repeating items they've already mentioned. One reason for this decline in recall performance among older adults may be attributed to what is known as a binding deficit. A binding deficit refers to difficulties in integrating various elements of complex events into cohesive representations. In episodic memory, binding is the process by which different aspects of an event are combined to form a unified memory or narrative. Researchers believe that older adults may struggle on episodic memory tests because they fail to adequately bind or glue the components of an event into a cohesive memory. Episodic retrieval can involve accessing individual items, recalling the context in which those items were presented, or a combination of both, which can lead to memory errors when these components are not sufficiently integrated during encoding. Numerous studies have investigated alterations in brain activity that are linked to episodic memory. And research suggests that the areas where these changes are most pronounced correspond well to normative aging versus memory decline due to disease. Specifically, changes primarily in the prefrontal cortex are associated with typical aging, while notable changes and damage to the hippocampus in comparison to the prefrontal cortex are indicative of Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia. Something that is interesting as well is that while episodic memory tends to decline with age, autobiographical memory is more resistant to decline. And we will go over this in later chapters, but it seems to be pretty stable over the later years. Researchers have also long known that aging does affect how we encode and retrieve information. Encoding is the use of strategies during the learning of new information. And so we use several strategies when we're trying to learn something new. It is anything that helps make learning easier for us and improves memory. So an example would be grouping similar items together, such as putting all fruits on a shopping list. using mental images to remember names, or organizing information in a particular way. So remembering a phone number, and let's say we're trying to remember a specific phone number that's given to us. We may remember a specific area code, and so that phone number might have the same area code, and so we may group the area code together, the numbers in the area code, and then try to remember the rest of the phone numbers while we are trying to retrieve the area code. And so remembering phone numbers in groups can help us categorize and separate the phone number from the area code. And so that's how we are better able to remember new information. Studies have shown that compared to younger adults, older adults are less likely to use these strategies spontaneously on their own. So when they are instructed to use strategies, they can do so effectively, but there's less spontaneity with it. And so it doesn't happen or occur automatically. So this means that differences in memory are more about the reduced spontaneous use of strategies rather than a decline in the ability to use them. Neuroimaging studies reveal that several changes happen in the brain, and so older adults often show increased activity in the prefrontal cortex during encoding, which indicates a way of responding that compensates for decline. Changes in the lateral prefrontal cortex seem to contribute to the decrease in spontaneous strategy use. And research does show that older adults often use fewer retrieval strategies as well on their own. And so the retrieval process is also another aspect of memory. And even when they are given strategies to help them remember, they still recall less information compared to younger adults. And so this suggests that the decline in memory for older adults is mainly due to difficulties with retrieving information. Studies reveal that age-related changes affect how the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus work together, which may help distinguish between normal aging and cognitive impairment. In younger adults, activity in these brain areas depend on how much the task requires linking different pieces of information. However, older adults show similar levels of brain activity regardless of whether linking is needed. Other studies suggest that older adults engage in more brain activity overall in the areas involved in retrieval, which may compensate for less efficient neural networks compared to younger adults. There was a study done by Shimara in 2014, and they proposed a theory explaining these declines in memory that suggests that the prefrontal cortex plays a key role in retrieval. It's supported by the medial temporal lobe, while the parietal lobe integrates this information. And these integration processes change significantly as we age. Overall, this evidence supports the idea that older adults process information differently than younger adults. And these differences often represent efforts to cope with the normal changes that come with aging. And so with encoding, it's really about there is a decline to use strategies in a spontaneous way. And for retrieval, older adults are using fewer retrieval strategies compared to younger adults. Prospective memory is the ability to remember to do something in the future, such as performing an action or attending an event at a specific time. A common example includes remembering to meet a friend at 2 o'clock this afternoon. A theoretical model of prospective memory is illustrated on the right-hand side, and this process begins with the intention to remember something in the future and relies heavily on monitoring both event and time cues. In event-based tasks, an action is triggered by a specific external event, such as answering a video call when a timer goes off. In contrast, time-based tasks require performing an action after a set duration, such as taking cookies out of the oven after 12 minutes without an alarm. Research has shown that time-based tasks tend to reveal more age-related differences, especially when people rely on self-generated strategies. However, the cues associated with event-based tasks, like alarm buzzers, can help reduce or eliminate these age differences. Adults of all ages benefit from reminders, but older adults particularly gain more from clearly prioritizing their tasks, ranking them from most important to least important. Autobiographical memory is your ability to recall information and events from your own life. It is basically a type of episodic memory that can also involve semantic memory. The episodic part includes remembering specific events from your past, such as birthday parties, vacations, and graduations. The semantic aspect consists of general knowledge and facts about your past, such as your personal traits or the fact that an event occurred, without needing to remember the exact details or timing. All adults experience changes in their autobiographical memories all over time. So autobiographical memory is one of those types of episodic memory that is more resistant to declining. It just evolves over time. Typically, specific episodic details such as the sequence of a conversation are forgotten first, but broader semantic information such as the main points of conversations is retained better. Neuroscience research indicates that these differences stem from how the hippocampus and related brain structures process and integrate different aspects of memory. While it may seem that details of events fade over time, this is not always the case. So changes in memory can only really be studied effectively when there are independent records from when the events occurred, such as biological or medical data. In a classic study, Casey and several researchers looked at records from the Harvard longitudinal studies of child health and development, and they tracked individuals from birth to age 50. They collected detailed information about these participants, including their childhood illnesses, smoking habits, and diet over the years. At age 50, participants completed a lengthy questionnaire about these topics, and their responses were compared with similar reports from 10 to 20 years earlier. The researchers found that about half of the memories recalled at age 50 were more accurate than those from age 40. However, specific details about specific food consumption or individual details or incidents were often not remembered well. And this suggests that these events can blur together and are not stored as separate memories. This also does suggest that it evolves over time, and some aspects do get better, or some aspects of memory are recalled better. It really is a matter of evolving and changing over time as we age. Flashbulb memories are vivid and detailed recollections of significant events that are often accompanied by strong emotions. These memories typically involve moments that are surprising or shocking, such as a major historical event, a personal tragedy, or other life-changing experience. So, for example, many people can vividly recall where they were and what they were doing when they heard about the 9/11 attack. While flashbulb memories feel very accurate and detailed, research has shown that they can still be subjected to distortions. And so, while people do remember a lot of specific details about major life events, especially those that do evoke strong emotions, there's a lot of research showing that when it's compared with the actual records or historical transcripts, they often find there's a lot of inaccuracy and discrepancies in these recollection of details. And so oftentimes, even though these events feel very real and feel accurate to the person, many times they are inaccurate details. But generally, people do get the gist of the event right, and emotional experiences tend to be remembered more vividly than unemotional ones. This tendency to misremember details can also explain why eyewitness testimonies are frequently unreliable. Interestingly, both younger and older adults tend to report more vivid memories from earlier life stages, specifically between ages 10 and 30 years, compared to middle adulthood. Events from our teens and 20s are often recalled more readily than those from later periods. Additionally, odors can serve as powerful cues for autobiographical memories, which can enhance recall even in individuals with Alzheimer's disease who may struggle with other types of memory. Understanding these aspects of memory can help us appreciate how our minds work and the complexities behind our recollections. Source memory is a skill or ability to recall the origin of a familiar event and the ability to determine if an event was imagined or actually happened. This skill is crucial in various contexts. So, for instance, it helps individuals differentiate between actually remembering to take medication and just thinking about it. Successfully making this distinction involves retrieving contextual information that's related to the original event, and it allows individuals to accurately reconstruct whether they took their medication. Research indicates that older adults tend to be less accurate on source memory tasks compared to younger adults. One reason for this difference is that younger adults are generally better at connecting the item they need to remember with its context. There is an exception that occurs when the source memory involves emotional information. And so when the source involves emotional or connects emotional context to the event, then both age groups may perform similarly because emotional details are processed differently and they can enhance memory retention. Neuroimaging studies show that older adults exhibit overactivation in the prefrontal cortex during source memory tasks, which is a sign of compensatory behavior. Additionally, research suggests that the brain regions responsible for processing source memory may change with age. At various points in our lives, we might hear stories about ourselves from friends or relatives that we did not actually experience. And over time, these repeated accounts can lead us to incorporate false events into our autobiographical memories. This phenomenon is known as false memory, and it's when individuals remember items or events that never happened. In laboratory studies, researchers often present participants with unrelated information. So they'll present a list of words or a video, and then we'll test their recall for both the presented information and plausible but unstudied details. People frequently misremember and confidently recognize plausible information. Interestingly, neuroimaging has shown that accurate and false memories are processed through different neural pathways. Repeatedly recalling an event helps guide the memory along the correct pathway, which aids in distinguishing real memories from false ones. Older adults tend to be more susceptible to false memory issues than younger adults. And it really has to do with the fact that older adults face more difficulty in identifying false information due to challenges in binding content to its context. So they struggle to separate misleading contextual information from relevant details, which can make them more susceptible to errors and mishearing. Understanding these mechanisms offers insight into the complexities of memory across different ages. Research has shown that exercise helps improve cognitive performance in older adults, no matter how the exercise is done or the personal traits of the individuals. Studies in neuroscience have also found that regular exercise benefits the brain in many ways, such as making it more flexible and adaptable. This means exercise could serve as an alternative treatment for conditions like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, and stroke. It may also help slow down the usual decline in brain function that comes with aging. In addition to exercise, speaking multiple languages may also help maintain cognitive function in older adults. A study in 2008 found that older adults ages 75 to 95 who spoke 4 or more languages had better cognitive health. Other research suggests that being bilingual can delay the onset of Alzheimer's symptoms by about 4.5 years compared to those who speak only one language. These findings suggest that knowing multiple languages could help protect our cognitive abilities as we age. Most adults can improve their memory through training, particularly by using effective memory strategies. So we can train people how to remember information better through the use of 3 key memory strategies that can be aimed at any individual. So 1, it requires training people to focus their attention on their information being presented. Second, leveraging information that's already stored in the brain to create new connections with new material. And then finally, strategies that establish cues that can aid future retrieval. Additionally, it helps to incorporate memory training into a healthy lifestyle that often enhances benefits. And so the research shows that well-designed memory training programs can be effective, with some studies indicating long-lasting positive effects. Memory improvement can also result from other types of cognitive training, such as teaching older adults to use tablet computers. Other ways of training older adults to improve cognitive function is through memory aids and strategies that can be categorized into meaningful groups. One effective classification is the EIEIO framework developed by Camp and his colleagues. This framework distinguishes between 2 types of memory: explicit memory, which involves conscious recall of information, and implicit memory, which refers to automatic unconscious recollection. It also divides memory aids into external aids, such as notebooks or calendars, and internal aids, which rely on mental techniques such as visualization. The O in the framework represents the learner's reaction, often an "oh" moment when a strategy proves to be effective. Explicit memory involves intentionally remembering facts, like recalling a definition during an exam, while implicit memory includes knowledge we don't have to actively think about, such as recognizing that stop signs are red octagons. This framework illustrates how different types of memory can be paired with various aids to create a wide range of options for improving memory. External memory aids include items like smartphones, smartwatches, calendars, post-it notes, tablets, and computers, and they help us remember things in everyday situations, such as making a shopping list for the supermarket. Smartphones are especially helpful, offering built-in features like video recording for medical visits and various apps for alarms and calendars. Other effective strategies involve placing items in noticeable spots, like putting kitchen trash cans by the door to remind you to take out the trash. Generally, explicit external memory aids, particularly those using technology, are very popular because they're easy to use and they're widely accessible and effective for adults that are dealing with various physical or mental challenges. Many smartphone apps can help reduce memory load by managing our contacts, our calendars, and maps. While social media can often use photos to connect names and faces, and these external strategies can significantly enhance cognitive performance in older adults. It's also important, however, to note that relying on technology can sometimes hinder memory. For example, people may struggle to remember a route after using a GPS app. So therefore, using technology to aid memory should be approached with caution and care to ensure that it enhances rather than detracts from memory performance. Self-evaluations about our memory are complex, but they're essential for understanding how well we remember and how we can improve. These evaluations depend not only on our actual memory performance, but also on our self-image. Researchers have identified two main types of awareness that are related to memory self-evaluation. The first aspect is called meta-memory, which refers to our understanding of how memory operates and our beliefs about it. So it's the knowledge about how our memory works and what we believe is true about our memory. So for example, we might know what recalling information is, and that is generally harder than recognizing it. That using strategies can help us remember, and that our working memory does have limits. We might also believe that memory declines with age, or that it's easier to remember appointments than names. Meta memory includes ideas like self-efficacy, the belief in our ability to remember and learn, and memory self-evaluation, which is an assessment of our memory skills. The second type of self-evaluation is memory monitoring, which is our awareness of how we are using our memory at any given moment. This can involve recognizing how we study, searching for specific facts, or keeping track of time for appointments. For instance, when we need to remember an important meeting, we might question whether our actions, like making a note on our smartphone, are enough to help us remember. There has been some research on age differences in meta-memory and memory monitoring. And so studies show that older adults tend to know less about memory's inner workings and its limitations. And so they seem to know less about how memory works compared to younger adults. Older adults also tend to view memory as less stable. So they often view their memory as less reliable and believing that it will decline with age. Additionally, older adults perceive that they have less control over their memory. Individuals with depression or cognitive disorders often have poor beliefs about their memory, which is also an important factor in understanding how these beliefs relate to memory performance. In the context of memory, belief in one's abilities is what's known as memory self-efficacy, and it refers to the confidence that a person has in their ability to perform a specific task. This concept is crucial for understanding how our memory changes with age. Memory self-efficacy differs from general knowledge about memory. Someone may understand how memory works, but still doubt their performance in a particular situation. It has emerged as a key component of metamemory due to its significant impact on performance across various tasks and its role in helping people predict their performance without prior experience. Research indicates that older adults with low memory self-efficacy tend to perform worse on memory tasks. Longitudinal studies from Australia show complex relationships in later life, revealing that knowledge of memory tests are connected to memory decline. Over recent decades, researchers have found that older adults who lack confidence in their memory often seek help from others and use certain strategies to improve their memory performance. There are several studies that suggest that how old a person feels can also influence their memory performance. So individuals that perceive themselves as younger tend to perform better and experience a slower decline in both immediate and delayed recall. And so overall, memory successes tend to bolster self-efficacy, and failures reduce one's belief of memory competence. Throughout this chapter, we've explored many normative changes in memory that occur as people age. While certain abilities, such as recalling the main idea of a story, tend to remain stable, common issues like forgetting names or shopping lists can be frustrating, but they are typical aspects of aging. Some individuals experience more significant memory losses, such as forgetting where they live or their spouse's name. So one question you might ask is, how do we distinguish between normative and non-normative memory changes? From a functional perspective, one way to identify the difference is to consider whether these changes disrupt daily living tasks. And generally, the normative changes that we discussed do not interfere with an individual's ability to function day to day. When memory problems start to affect our everyday life, like consistently forgetting to turn off the stove or how to get home, it's important to seek help from a healthcare professional, including a psychologist. Advancements in neuroscience, particularly through neuroimaging, have greatly explained our understanding of diseases and brain changes that can lead to non-normative memory performance. These imaging techniques help identify conditions such as tumors or strokes that might explain unexpected memory difficulties. Mapping normative age-related changes in memory is complicated because various brain regions are involved in processing information. There's key areas such as the prefrontal cortex, the parietal region, the temporal lobe, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. They all play a critical role in memory function. Additionally, structural changes in both white and gray matter can affect memory, and these changes can vary depending on the presence and type of disease. It's crucial to remember that distinguishing between normative and non-normative aging and differentiating memory issues from other cognitive problems can be difficult. There's no specific threshold of forgetfulness that signals a serious concern. Serious memory issues can stem from underlying mental or physical health problems, which need thorough evaluation alongside a complete memory assessment. A good rule of thumb for determining whether there is a memory issue and it warrants clinical attention is this. Forgetting where you parked in a large lot is typical, but forgetting that you drove at all is a cause for concern. There's also damage to the brain from various conditions that can lead to serious memory problems. So for example, severe seizures from epilepsy can harm the hippocampus and make it hard for people to learn and remember new information. Damage to the medial temporal lobe often severely affects long-term memory. Strokes can also occur in areas of the brain that result in significant memory loss, and sometimes people experience a temporary and complete loss of memory and confusion about time. This is what's known as temporary global amnesia, TGA. And this condition is most common in middle-aged adults and often involves sudden blackouts and repeated questions. Episodes can last from a few minutes to hours, usually leaving only a gap in memory afterwards. The exact cause of TGA is unknown, but neuroimaging studies have shown that it disrupts the neural connections in the hippocampus. TGA has been linked to migraines, temporal lobe epilepsy, issues with a valve in the jugular vein, and transient ischemic attacks. Researchers and clinicians often overlook nutrition as a potential cause of memory problems in adults. Studies show that certain compounds in healthy diets are crucial for good memory function. For example, flavonoids, which are found in foods like green tea and blueberries, may help reverse age-related issues with spatial memory. Additionally, higher dietary iron intake during midlife has been linked to better verbal memory, even after considering other factors. There are also several vitamins, such as B vitamins 6, 9, and 12 that are also associated with memory and cognitive functions. This suggests that evaluating older adults' diets is very important when assessing their memory performance. What may seem like serious decline could actually stem from poor nutrition or side effects of medications. Unfortunately, many people lack access to brain-healthy foods, which can contribute to sociocultural disparities in memory-related disorders. The troubling part is that these memory issues could likely be improved with better nutrition. However, researchers and clinicians often neglect to ask about dietary habits, which is really crucial for accurate assessments and avoiding a misdiagnosis.